We actually know that likely when body fat gets below about 12 to 14%, that you lose some of the healthy brown fat. I think both COVID and COVID vaccines can be linked to some neurologic deficits. The biggest problem, honestly, with vegetable oils is that when you look at the studies that show the bad side of them, canola, corn, peanut, safflower oil, they're all from GMO crops.
Welcome to our Q&A highlights. Q&A sessions are recorded every month, and our enhanced members get an exclusive opportunity to ask questions from one of cellular medicine's brightest minds, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Get a chance to ask your questions by becoming our enhanced member at bli.academy/memberships. You also get access to our content library full of tips, articles, videos, lectures, previous live Q&A sessions, and more.
I think both COVID and COVID vaccines can be linked to some neurologic deficits. I will say it's a bit of a loaded question. I don't like to say too much about vaccines because, I think everybody has their own opinions here. But I will just tell you some of the recent literature that came out. And some of you probably just saw a recent article that just came out that showed a very statistically significant increased stroke risk in people over 65 that went in and got the flu and COVID vaccine at the same time. And not to say you shouldn't get the vaccine if you think it's the best thing for you and your doctor thinks it's the best thing for you, then that is your choice. But you should be aware of the data, and I think there's some concerns. There's other recent study that really just came out that showed that in 6 months to 17-year-olds, so in the younger population when they were given the vaccine, that there was a significant increased risk of creating a seizure disorder. And then lastly, a study that came from NIH that looked at severe neurologic adverse events, including Bell's palsy, which is paralysis of one side of the face, transverse myelitis, which is basically you are paralyzed from whatever point down, Guillain-Barré syndrome, where you just gradually lose all muscle function, usually starts to resolve, headaches, seizure disorders following COVID vaccine, and said that there was an unacceptably high, from an NIH study, unacceptably high amount of those neurologic complications, and we need to keep an eye on this vaccine. We actually know that likely when body fat gets below about 12 to 14%, that you lose some of the healthy brown fat as well. So we have white fat, which is sort of extra fat, just sort of storage, not doing as much good. And then we have brown fat, which actually plays a really essential role in a lot of biological processes. In fact, it's essential for some hormone production. So you're actually losing some of that patient's own hormone production. It's important for vitamin absorption. It's important for immune function. In fact, we find that women who have low body fat like that actually have significantly more problems with immune dysfunction. A study at Whitaker Cardiovascular Institute that came out, I don't have the reference to this one, just remember it from a few years ago, but showed that fat cells in a lean body produce proteins, adiponectin being one of them, that help the immune system with autophagy. So remember, autophagy, getting rid of damaged cells. Well, now if I get my body fat too low and I'm losing that essential fat, then I actually have disrupted autophagy, and I'm going to increase my risk of diseases, autoimmune diseases, diabetes, heart diseases, and cancer. So I try and tell people 12 to 14% is probably as low as you really want to go. If you're somebody like a bodybuilder and you want to temporarily go down into the 8 to 10% range, fine, you should do that as a temporary effect and not continuously hold body fat at that level. Tony asked about vegetable oils, good or bad? Population-based observation studies show that over the years, obesity and diabetes correlate with increased consumption of vegetable oils. Yes, prevailing opinion seems that they're good for you. What's your take? This is a complicated question, Tony. And you've got Dr. Mercola and Dave Asprey and those guys. Seed oils are the root of every single evil in the world. And yet you look at things like sunflower oils and soy lecithin. Those are super rich sources of choline. In fact, most of you are taking a phosphatidylcholine supplement are probably getting it from a sunflower or soy lecithin, so from basically a seed oil base. Super rich sources of choline, which is absolutely critical to health. I will tell you, I'm astounded now. We do what's called a prodrome scan on our patients that's looking at choline levels, and every freaking person is low. It's astounding to me. So I think that although they do support choline production, they may have less beneficial effects to the brain. So I will tell you, probably a better thing to look at in terms of getting choline instead of these seed oils is using things like eggs. And, eggs are a superfood, a power food. You probably need probably 4 egg yolks a day. You'll get really good choline. The biggest problem, honestly, with vegetable oils is that when you look at the studies that show the bad side of them, canola, corn, peanut, safflower oil, they're all from GMO crops. and they're highly refined. And even organic sources are highly oxidized, and that makes them dangerous. So the problem is, can you truly get a pure source that's not oxidized? Pretty difficult. And that's where, when you're taking an oxidized fat, it causes damage. That can even occur in your good fats like fish oil. Once they're oxidized, they become dangerous to your health. And I think that's where the confusion lies. And I don't know that you can get an adequate source of those vegetable oils that would have, some of its health benefits without getting the downside. So I think it's better to just use things like avocado oil, really good olive oil, pressed virgin coconut oil, ghee, pure butter, things like that instead. Next question, on the topic of insulin, I'm seeing patients present with insulin levels below 2. So when we look at insulin levels, and I really encourage you guys who are looking at metabolic health, I always see people measure their hemoglobin A1C. You need to also be measuring insulin levels, fasting insulin levels. That's a really important parameter to look at. We like to see fasting insulin levels below 6 for people who are in an optimal metabolic state. So we want to see a hemoglobin A1C less than 5.4, 5.6, probably upper limit of okay. We want to see a insulin level less than 6. So if you're starting to get to an insulin level of 12, you're starting to produce too much insulin. But they're saying that they're seeing people with high hemoglobin A1Cs, like 5.7, 5.8, and very low insulin levels below 2. So what does that mean? So she said most of these patients are postmenopausal and have chosen not to be optimizing with bioidentical hormone replacement. And she knows that that will present an issue. Well, when I see low insulin levels, I actually had a long talk with Dr. Milheiro, who runs a very high performance training center in Portugal. We had a long talk about this because he's very adamant that when you see these low insulin levels in these people, it's basically that you've got some type of high stress state. Either they're fasting too much, they're over exercising, they have a very high stress lifestyle. Certainly hormones play a role there because hormones will basically increase adrenal stress, and basically that in of itself is creating a stressor to the body. Well, it can also be indicative that there's some low-grade pancreatic dysfunction or latent autoimmune disorders. So remember, low-grade pancreatic dysfunction, also people who have more autoimmune disorders. But when I see glucose high and insulin low, it is a stress state to the body. We need to optimize everything, and we need to look at what else we might be excluding. And we need to really advise these people to look at their training regimens, their eating regimens, things like that. And we'll also caution that I'm seeing a lot of this now in our sort of post-COVID and COVID vaccine world. We're seeing what's called LADA syndrome, which is latent autoimmune diabetes of adults. So basically, it's this type 1 diabetes presenting in older people. We firmly believe that everybody is very individual and has to be addressed as individuals. It's like, one of the things I hate is that, you see these posts on things and everybody needs this supplement and everybody needs this and everybody needs that. And you don't. In fact, there's a whole lot of people who don't need a whole lot of supplements at all, and maybe you only need a few. So what we really encourage is that everybody starts out with sort of baseline testing. We think that kind of runs in a similar state for everybody. I think everybody baseline needs to know their full cardiometabolic profile. They need to know, what is their myeloperoxidase and their oxidized LDLs and their C-reactive protein and what is their LP(a). So they need to know not just the basic lipid profile, they need a full cardiometabolic profile, including things like adiponectin and fasting insulin levels and hemoglobin A1C and glycosylated protein. So those are all things. So Dr. Perlmutter, who a lot of you know, who wrote the book Drop Acid, because he's very adamant that we need to keep uric acid low for overall metabolic health and longevity. And he states that the ideal range is 5.5 for men and 4.5 for women as the upper limit. He accepts, being low as a good thing. And I'm glad you asked this question, because I think that this is a really poorly understood. It was funny in my roundtable last night with Dr. Goodnow, we were talking about homocysteine. There's some things there too, where everybody wants really low homocysteine. Well, sometimes really low values are not necessarily a good thing. So uric acid is a waste product of purine metabolism. So purines are basically hydrocyclic bases that are used in a whole bunch of biochemical processes. So for instance, ATP is a purine. The bases that make up your DNA and RNA molecules are purines. So as those purines get metabolized, uric acid is produced. DNA and RNA are not a bad thing. Now, things like meat and beer also contain purines. Beer maybe not such a good source of purines, right? So uric acid is not necessarily bad, but it can be. The problem is when you get poor kidney clearance of uric acid. or you are taking too much in, like too much fructose in, high fructose corn syrups, refined foods, and your kidney can't handle that purine load, particularly these exogenous purines, and you're screwing up your metabolic, so your sort of homeopathic or homeostatic metabolism, then uric acid can start to raise, and it can accumulate in things like joints, which causes gout, and that's not a good thing. High uric acid also increases the risk of metabolic syndrome, increases cardiovascular risk, especially in diabetics. So high uric acid is not a good thing. But is low uric acid a good thing? Actually, not. In fact, you look at the biggest problem in neurologic diseases, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, nervous system viral infections, all of those groups have very low uric acid levels. So universally, most of the neurodegenerative diseases, if you look at uric acid, those people are low. And it's not because they're eating perfect diets and they have basically, great metabolic rate or metabolism. It's because low uric acid is a sign of an NAD deficiency. Remember we said that